In the dusty heart of the 1872 Old West, a lone rancher rode unarmed into a hostile tribal camp, his voice steady as he offered his entire fortune, 1,000 horses, for one forbidden night with the chief's wife. Warriors froze, rifles cocked as the chief's eyes blazed with rage. This wasn't some reckless whim of desire. It was a desperate father's ploy to snatch his dying son from the jaws of a merciless fever that no white doctor could tame. Whispers of the offer had twisted into ugly rumors, nearly igniting a bloodbath on the spot. 3 days earlier, the rancher's world had shattered. His 14-year-old boy lay pale and burning, skin like ash with mere weeks left. He'd hunted every healer, but only one name echoed, the woman now bound to the chief, a survivor of a brutal raid years ago where flames had claimed her own child to the same cursed sickness. Escorted under guard, the rancher spat out his bold proposition, but the chief saw the lie beneath. "You seek to steal my wife to your ranch, the killer of her kin." Tension crackled like dry lightning as the truth unraveled. Healing the fever demanded a rare plant from the high country's forbidden peaks, a grueling 7-day ritual of harvest and precise dosing. One wrong move, and it turned to deadly poison. The rancher pleaded not for her body, but her ancient knowledge, begging to learn the ways himself. She agreed, but on savage terms, venture north alone with her into unforgiving wilds. At her mercy, amid grudges that cut deeper than any blade, the chief grinned coldly, deliver the horses at dawn or face the consequences. Back at his sprawling ranch on the open plains, the rancher's men mutinied against surrendering the herd, but he silenced them with iron will. As the sun rose, he honored the deal, kissed his fevered son farewell, and vanished into the rocky heights with the enigmatic woman leading the way. She spoke little at first, guiding him to a hidden creek where purple-flowered plants clung to the banks, their roots a lifeline or a toxin depending on the hand that wielded them. Days melted into exhausting trials, spotting the elusive herbs, peeling roots with surgical care, brewing potent elixirs under her unyielding gaze. Storms lashed the trails, wolves shadowed their steps, and old wounds festered into fragile bonds. She shared fragments of her shattered past. He admitted haunting regrets. But as trust teetered on the edge, betrayal lurked in the shadows. Would she guide him to salvation, or drag him into the abyss for vengeance long overdue? In the looming climax, buried secrets erupted, compelling a heart-wrenching choice between old hatreds and hard-won redemption as the fever's grip finally wavered. In the blistering heat of 1872, deep in the untamed Old West, a weathered rancher named Harlan Brooks, 45 years old, tall and rugged with sun-weathered skin and a thick beard, spurred his horse straight into the heart of Thunder Ridge Camp, a rocky desert stronghold ringed by sheer cliffs and dotted with sturdy tipi structures. He came unarmed, his hands raised high, but his words hit like a shotgun blast. He offered his entire herd of 1,000 horses, every last bit of his hard-earned fortune, for just one night alone with the chief's wife, Mira Lighthorse, 35 years old, slender with long black hair and piercing dark eyes. The Apache warriors halted mid-stride, their rifles snapping up in a deadly chorus, while Chief Kahali's face twisted into a mask of pure fury, his grip tightening on a tomahawk that had tasted blood before. This bold intrusion wasn't born from some base lust or fleeting madness. It was the raw desperation of a father clawing against fate to save his only son from a fever that burned hotter than the desert sun, a sickness no frontier doctor could touch. But rumors had already warped the tale across the plains, painting Harlan as a lecherous fool, and now those whispers threatened to unleash a hail of bullets that could bury him right there in the dust. If that gut punch of a gamble hooked you right from the jump, Smash that like button now to fuel more of these raw Old West sagas that pull no punches. Flashback 3 days to Willow Creek Ranch. A sprawling spread of wooden homesteads and vast horse pastures stretching under endless blue skies, where Harlan's world had come crashing down like a collapsed mine shaft. His 14-year-old boy, Elias, lay in a sweat-soaked bed inside the main cabin, his skin ashen grey, eyes sunken like forgotten wells, the fever raging through him with a vengeance that promised only weeks before it claimed him entirely. Harlan had ridden miles, chasing down every snake oil salesman and backwoods healer from here to the territorial line, but their potions and prayers did nothing but drain his pockets and deepen his despair. Whispers from traders and outcasts kept circling back to one name, Mira Lighthorse, the wise and resilient healer now wed to Chief Kahali, her spirit haunted by traumas that ran as deep as the canyons. 7 years prior, in a brutal clash over water rights that turned bloody, Harlan's own ranch hands had set fire to her village, the flames swallowing homes and lives alike. In the chaos, Mira's young daughter had succumbed to smoke fever, the very same affliction now tormenting Elias. It was karma's vicious loop, circling back to bite the man who had once turned a blind eye to the destruction. Harlan couldn't shake the irony as he saddled up that fateful morning, the weight of regret pressing on him like a loaded saddlebag. He knew the risks. Riding solo into Apache territory was suicide for most white men, especially one with blood on his ledger from that long-ago raid. But a father's love doesn't count the odds. It charges headlong. As he approached Thunder Ridge Camp, the air thick with the scent of sagebrush and wood smoke, warriors emerged from the shadows of the cliffs, their faces painted for war, bows strung and rifles gleaming under the relentless sun. They surrounded him, escorting him to the central fire where Chief Kahali sat like a stone sentinel. Mira at his side, her dark eyes locking onto Harlan with a mix of recognition and simmering rage. Harlan dismounted, dust swirling around his boots, and laid out his offer plain as day, his voice steady despite the rifles aimed at his chest. The camp fell silent, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the distant cry of a hawk. Kahali's laughter started low, building to a thunderous roar that echoed off the rocks. "You ride in here, pale face, demanding my wife for your twisted pleasures, the same man whose fire stole her child." The tension spiked sharper than a cactus spine, warriors inching closer, fingers itching on triggers. But Mira stepped forward, her slender frame cutting through the standoff like a knife through hide. She revealed the truth that Harlan had pieced together from those desperate whispers. Curing the fever wasn't some quick tryst or stolen night. It required the shadowroot plant, a rare herb with vibrant purple flowers and roots that could heal or kill depending on how they were handled. Harvesting it demanded a perilous 7-day ritual high in the Forbidden Peaks, where one slip in peeling, brewing, or dosing turned medicine into poison. Harlan dropped to his knees, not in defeat, but in raw plea. He didn't want her body. He wanted her knowledge, the ancient ways passed down through her people, to learn the ritual himself and bring salvation back to his boy. Mira's eyes, piercing and unyielding, studied him for what felt like an eternity, the ghosts of her past flickering in their depths. She agreed, but her terms were as harsh as the desert wind. He would ride north with her alone into the uncharted high country, learning at her mercy amid terrains that forgave no mistakes, where old grudges could fester or finally heal. Kahali smirked, his fury cooling to calculated amusement. "The horses at dawn, rancher. Deliver them, or we'll hunt you down like the dog you are." Harlan nodded, the deal sealed in the flickering firelight, but as he rode back to Willow Creek Ranch under the cover of night, doubt gnawed at him like a coyote on a bone. His crew, a rough band of cowboys loyal through thick and thin, gathered in the barn as he explained the bargain. Mutiny brewed fast. Giving up the entire herd meant ruin for them all. No more drives, no more paychecks, just bankruptcy under those wide-open skies. "Boss, this is madness," one grizzled hand protested, his face lined from years of sun and saddle. "That woman's people have every reason to string you up, and you're handing over our livelihood." Harlan's determined gaze silenced them, his resourceful mind already plotting contingencies. He reminded them of Elias, the boy they'd all watched grow, now fading in that cabin bed. Regret fueled his resolve. He wouldn't let history repeat its cruelties. By lantern light, they rounded up the horses, 1,000 strong, their hooves thundering like an approaching storm. What do you think Harlan should do next in this high-stakes bind? Drop a comment below. Would you risk everything for family, or cut your losses and run? Dawn broke over Willow Creek Ranch with a golden haze, painting the pastures in ethereal light as Harlan led the massive herd toward Thunder Ridge Camp. The horses nickered nervously, sensing the shift, while Harlan's heart pounded with a mix of fear and fierce hope. He arrived at the camp's edge, where Kahali and his warriors waited, Mira standing apart, her long black hair whipping in the morning breeze. The exchange was swift and wordless. Horses for a chance at redemption. Harlan dismounted, handing over the reins, then turned to Elias one last time back at the ranch before departing. The boy's fevered whispers haunted him. "Pa, don't leave me." With a final kiss on that burning forehead, Harlan mounted up and followed Mira into the rocky heights, the camp fading behind them like a bad dream. She led in silence at first, her resilient stride navigating the steep trails with ease, while Harlan trailed, his rugged frame aching from the climb. They crested a ridge, the air turning crisp and thin, and stopped at a hidden creek where clusters of shadow-root plants bloomed along the banks, their purple flowers swaying like forbidden temptations, roots buried deep in the soil, impotent with both cure and curse. The days that followed blurred into a grueling odyssey, each one a test of body and spirit. Mira taught with unyielding precision, her wise voice cutting through the wind as she demonstrated how to identify the plants amid deceptive lookalikes, spot the subtle vein patterns on the leaves, feel the texture of the stems to avoid the toxic variants that mimicked them perfectly. Harlan's hands, calloused from years of roping and riding, fumbled at first, peeling the roots too roughly, drawing sharp rebukes from Mira. "One tear too deep, and it's poison in your boy's veins," she warned, her piercing eyes locking onto his, forcing him to confront the fragility of it all. They brewed the first elixir over a small fire in a sheltered canyon, the steam rising with an earthy scent that promised hope. But Harlan's mind raced with what-ifs. One wrong boil, and it could end everything. Storms rolled in without mercy, drenching them in icy rain that turned trails to mudslides, forcing them to huddle under overhangs where conversations turned personal. Mira shared fragments of her haunted past, the night her village burned, the screams of her daughter lost to the smoke, the way the flames had etched scars on her soul that no time could erase. Harlan, his deep sense of regret bubbling up, confessed his role. Not the one who lit the torch, but the man who profited from the land it cleared, blind to the human cost until now. Trust built like a fragile bridge over a chasm, each lesson strengthening it a little more. They faced dangers that tested their uneasy alliance. A pack of wolves circling their camp one moonless night, their howls echoing off the cliffs, forcing Harlan to stand guard with Mira's guidance on using natural repellents from the land. Another day, a flash flood roared through a narrow pass, sweeping away supplies and nearly them with it. Harlan's resourcefulness shone as he rigged a rope from vines to pull Mira to safety, her hand gripping his in a moment of raw vulnerability. But beneath the surface, old grudges simmered. Mira's resilience masked a storm of emotions. Could she truly forgive the man tied to her deepest pain? Harlan sensed the betrayal lurking, wondering if she'd lead him astray, dosing the roots wrong on purpose to exact revenge. Yet glimpses of humanity broke through, shared meals of foraged roots and dried meat, stories of lost loved ones that mirrored their pains, forging bonds amid the isolation. As the seventh day loomed, the high country grew more treacherous, peaks jagged like broken teeth against the sky, the air thin enough to steal breath. They harvested the final batch of shadowroot, Mira's instructions a lifeline. Peel only the outer layer, brew at a simmer, dose in moonlight. The ritual neared completion, but secrets began to unravel. Harlan discovered a hidden scar on Mira's arm from that fateful raid, a mark he'd unknowingly helped cause. Confrontation brewed like the elixirs themselves, forcing questions of vengeance versus redemption into the open. Before we dive into that shattering climax where everything hangs in the balance, if this frontier tale of desperation and fragile alliances has you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe and turn on notifications now. You won't want to miss how it all explodes. In the end, as the fever finally broke back at Willow Creek Ranch, the cost proved steeper than any herd of horses, with choices that redefined lives forever. Loved this wild ride through the Old West? Comment your favorite twist, subscribe if you haven't already, and share with a friend. Let's keep these epic stories thundering across the plains. As the seventh day dawned with a chill that seeped into their bones, Harlan and Mira pressed onward through the jagged peaks of the high country, the air growing thinner with every step. The landscape had transformed into a brutal maze of sheer cliffs and narrow ledges, where one misplaced boot could send a man tumbling into oblivion. Mira led the way, her slender frame navigating the treacherous paths with the ease of someone born to this wild terrain, while Harlan followed, his tall, rugged build straining against the relentless climb. The shadowroot plant they sought for the final harvest clung to the highest crevices, its purple flowers a deceptive beauty, hiding roots that could heal or kill depending on the hand that wielded them. Tension hung between them like a storm cloud ready to burst. Harlan's mind churned with doubts, each glance at Mira stirring the pot of old grudges. He couldn't shake the image of that hidden scar on her arm, a jagged reminder of the raid that had shattered her world. How deep did her resentment run? Was this journey her path to redemption, or a slow march toward his undoing? Mira, for her part, moved with a quiet intensity, her piercing dark eyes scanning the horizon, not just for dangers, but for signs of Harlan's true intentions. She had agreed to teach him the ritual, but trust was a fragile thread, easily snapped by the winds of memory. They reached a precarious ledge overlooking a vast chasm, the wind howling like a chorus of ghosts. Mira pointed to a cluster of shadowroot blooming defiantly on the far side, accessible only by crossing a rickety natural bridge of fallen rock and twisted vines. "That's the last we need," she said, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of warning. "Cross carefully. The roots here are the purest, but the fall is unforgiving." Harlan nodded, his determined nature pushing him forward, but as he stepped onto the bridge, a gust whipped up, shaking the structure. Rocks crumbled beneath his feet, and for a heart-stopping moment he teetered on the edge, arms flailing for balance. Mira's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength, pulling him back to solid ground. Their eyes met in that instant, a spark of unspoken alliance amid the peril, but Harlan saw the flicker of hesitation in her gaze. Was it mercy or calculation? Safely across, they harvested the plants together, Mira's instructions precise and unyielding. Peel the outer layer slowly, expose the white core without nicking it. One cut too deep, and the toxin spreads. Her hands moved with practiced grace, demonstrating on a sample while Harlan mirrored her, his thick fingers clumsy at first, but improving with each attempt. As they worked, the conversation turned inevitably to the past, the high altitude stripping away pretenses like layers of bark. Mira spoke of her daughter, not in the fragmented whispers of before, but in vivid detail. The way the girl's laughter had echoed through the village before the flames silenced it forever. "She was 5, with eyes like mine," Mira said, her voice cracking just once. The smoke took her slowly, choking the life from her lungs. "And you. Your kind cleared the way for ranches like Willow Creek, turning our waters into your fortune." Harlan felt the weight of her words like a boulder on his chest. His resourcefulness had always been his shield, but here, exposed in the mountains, it felt inadequate. "I didn't know," he admitted, his deep voice rough with regret. "I was blind to it all, chasing land and legacy, but seeing my boy wasting away. It's opened my eyes to the costs I've ignored." The admission hung in the air, a bridge toward understanding, but Mira's resilience held firm, her haunted expression revealing the storm within. She didn't forgive easily. The pain was too raw, too intertwined with the man before her. As they descended with their precious harvest, new obstacles emerged to test their bond. A sudden blizzard swept in from the north, blanketing the trails in snow that turned the rocky heights into a whiteout nightmare. Visibility dropped to nothing, the cold biting through their thin blankets and furs. They sought shelter in a shallow cave, huddling close for warmth. The fire they built sputtering against the wind. Here, in the enforced intimacy, secrets spilled out like melting snow. Mira revealed more about the ancient ritual, not just the mechanics, but its spiritual weight. A ceremony passed down through generations, invoking the spirits of the land to balance life and death. "It's not just plants," she explained, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. "It's atonement. For the fever to break, the one seeking healing must confront their sins." Harlan listened, his beard crusted with ice, realizing the depth of what she demanded. This wasn't merely a lesson in botany, it was a trial of the soul. He shared his own burdens, the guilt of leading raids in his younger days, not directly but by association, profiting from the violence that had displaced tribes like Mira's. "I thought it was progress," he said bitterly. "Now I see it was theft." The storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within, as Mira probed further, asking pointed questions about the night her village burned. Harlan's answers were honest but painful, admitting he'd been there on the fringes, scouting water sources for Willow Creek Ranch. The revelation stung, widening the chasm between them, even as the cave forced proximity. When the blizzard finally eased, they emerged to find the path altered. Avalanches had reshaped the descent, blocking familiar routes and forcing detours through uncharted territory. Wildlife became a constant threat. A mountain lion stalked them for miles, its golden eyes glinting from the shadows, drawn by the scent of their dwindling supplies. Harlan's resourcefulness kicked in again. He fashioned a torch from dried branches and resin, waving it to scare the beast away, while Mira chanted an old ward, her wise intonations blending with the crackle of flames. But the encounter left them both shaken, Harlan nursing a shallow scratch from a near miss. Mira's resilience shining as she bound it with strips of cloth and a poultice from foraged herbs. Deeper into the descent, betrayal's shadow loomed larger. Harlan caught Mira hesitating during a brewing lesson by a frozen stream, her hand hovering over the shadowroot roots as if debating a fatal adjustment. "Is this the right dosage?" he asked, his tone edged with suspicion. She met his gaze steadily. "It is, if you trust me." The words were a challenge, forcing Harlan to confront his paranoia. Was she leading him to success or sabotage? The fragile trust they'd built cracked under the strain, old grudges resurfacing like weeds through snow. Mira admitted her own doubts. Part of her wanted vengeance, to let the ritual fail and watch Harlan suffer as she had. "Your son's fever is the same that took my daughter," she said fiercely. "Why should I save him when you helped destroy mine?" The confrontation escalated as they camped that night under a canopy of stars, the high country's isolation amplifying every word. Harlan pleaded his case, his determined spirit refusing to yield. "I'm not that man anymore. This journey, it's changed me. Teach me true, and I'll make amends. Return lands, share waters, whatever it takes." Mira's haunted eyes softened slightly, but the pain ran deep. She revealed another secret. During the raid, she'd lost not just her daughter, but a piece of her heritage. Ancient scrolls burned in the flames that detailed rituals like this one. Helping Harlan felt like betraying her ancestors, yet refusing meant letting innocence die again. As dawn broke on the final leg toward Thunder Ridge Camp, they faced their greatest obstacle yet. A raging river swollen from the melt, cutting off the direct path back. The current roared with deadly force, logs and debris churning in its grip. Crossing meant rigging a precarious ford, using ropes woven from vines and Harlan's lasso. Mira went first, her slender form battling the water's pull, nearly swept away, until Harlan anchored her from the bank. Together they made it across, drenched and exhausted. But the effort forged a deeper connection, vulnerability stripping away layers of animosity. With the ritual's components complete, they rode hard toward Willow Creek Ranch, the elixir brewing in sealed pouches at Harlan's side. But the journey had unraveled too many secrets. Mira confessed one last truth as they neared the plains, a hidden alliance with her tribe that could turn against Harlan if he faltered in his promises. Harlan, in turn, revealed his crew's unrest back home, whispers of rebellion over the lost herd that might erupt into violence upon his return. The stage was set for a shattering showdown, where choices between vengeance and redemption would determine not just the boy's fate, but the fragile peace between worlds. Back at the ranch, as they administered the first doses under the moonlight, the fever's grip began to loosen, but shadows of doubt lingered. Harlan watched his son's color return, a miracle unfolding, yet he knew the cost was mounting. Old enemies stirred, and Mira's terms demanded more than horses. The High Country's trials had prepared them for this moment, but the true test lay in the revelations ahead, forcing Harlan to decide if redemption was worth the price of his past. As the moonlight filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls of Willow Creek Ranch, Harlan knelt beside his son's bed, the boy's shallow breaths, the only sound, breaking the heavy silence. The elixir, brewed from the shadowroot plant's purple flowers and carefully peeled roots, dripped slowly into the child's mouth from a small vial. Mira stood across the room, her slender frame silhouetted against the flickering lantern light, her piercing dark eyes fixed on the scene with a mix of hope and unresolved anger. The first doses had already begun to work their magic, chasing away the grey pallor from the boy's skin, but the air hummed with unspoken threats. Harlan's crew, those rugged men who'd toiled the plains for years, gathered outside the homestead, their murmurs growing into a low rumble like distant thunder. They'd lost the entire herd to this gamble. 1,000 horses handed over to the tribe at Thunder Ridge Camp, and resentment festered like an open wound. Harlan rose, wiping sweat from his brow, his tall, rugged build casting a long shadow. He glanced at Mira, searching for reassurance in her wise yet haunted expression. "He's turning the corner," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "The fever's breaking, just like you said." She nodded curtly, but her resilience masked the storm within. The journey through the high country had peeled back layers of their shared history, forcing confessions under howling winds and relentless storms. Yet here, back on familiar ground, the weight of those revelations pressed down harder. Mira's confession about her tribe's hidden alliance lingered like smoke from a dying fire. If Harlan didn't honor his promises of returning lands and sharing waters, warriors from Thunder Ridge could descend, turning this fragile peace into bloodshed. Outside, the sprawling plains stretched under the wide open skies, the vast horse pastures now eerily empty. Harlan stepped onto the porch, his thick beard catching the cool night breeze, and faced his men. They were a motley group, sun-weathered like him, their faces etched with hardship from years of driving cattle across unforgiving terrain. The foreman, a burly man named Jed, stepped forward, his eyes narrowed in accusation. "You gave it all away, Harlan. Every last horse for what? Some Apache witch's brew? We've got families too, mouths to feed. This ranch is done without that herd." The others nodded, hands twitching toward holsters, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Harlan's determined spirit flared. He wouldn't back down now, not with his boy's life hanging in the balance. "I did what I had to," he growled, his voice steady despite the regret gnawing at him. "That boy in there is worth more than any fortune. And Mira, she's given us a chance at something bigger, redemption, but words alone couldn't quell the brewing mutiny." Jed spat on the ground, his face twisting in anger. "Redemption? You mean bending to them after all we've fought for?" The argument escalated, voices rising as the men circled closer, the wooden homestead creaking under the strain of the moment. Inside, Mira heard the commotion and slipped out, her long black hair swaying as she positioned herself beside Harlan. Her presence alone silenced some of the grumbling. They knew her as the resilient woman who'd guided their boss through perils they could only imagine. Yet her haunted eyes betrayed the deeper conflict. She'd lost everything in that raid 7 years ago, in 1872, when flames consumed her village over water rights. The same fever that had claimed her daughter now threatened Harlan's son, a cruel echo that twisted her resolve. As the standoff intensified, a distant rumble echoed across the plains, not thunder, but the sound of approaching riders. Harlan's heart sank. He recognized the rhythm of Apache horses, swift and purposeful. Mira's alliance had activated sooner than expected. From the shadows of the rocky desert terrain beyond the ranch, figures emerged, led by the chief himself. His warriors fanned out like guardians of the cliffs surrounding Thunder Ridge Camp. They rode in formation, teepee structures from their camp now a distant memory as they closed in on this confrontation. The chief, a stern man with feathers braided into his hair, dismounted and approached, his gaze locking onto Mira. "You returned," he said in a low tone, acknowledging her with a nod. "But has he upheld his end?" Harlan stepped forward, his resourceful mind racing for a way to defuse the powder keg. "I will," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of his regrets. "The lands we took, I'll sign them back. The waters from Willow Creek, shared equally, no more clashes." The words hung in the air, a pledge born from the grueling lessons in the high country where Mira had taught him not just the ritual of the shadow root plant, but the value of ancient ways. Peeling those toxic roots precisely, brewing the elixir under her watchful eye, had been more than survival. It was a bridge across old grudges. Storms had raged around them, wolves howling in the night, forcing trust to build fragile amid shared vulnerabilities. Yet the chief's eyes burned with skepticism, and Harlan's crew bristled at the sight of the warriors. Jed drew his pistol, the metallic click echoing like a death knell. "We ain't handing over nothing else," he shouted, igniting the powder. Chaos erupted in an instant. Shots rang out, bullets whizzing through the night as men dove for cover behind wooden fences and hay bales. Harlan tackled Jed to the ground, wresting the gun from his hand, his rugged strength prevailing. "Stop this madness!" he bellowed, pinning the foreman down. Mira, ever wise, darted between the lines, her slender form a beacon of calm amid the frenzy. She raised her hands, calling out in her native tongue to the warriors, urging restraint. The chief held up a fist, halting his men, their rifles lowering reluctantly. In the heart of the melee, Harlan rose, blood trickling from a graze on his arm, and faced the chief directly. This was the shattering showdown, secrets unraveling like frayed ropes. Mira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trauma haunting her. "He speaks truth," she said, addressing both sides. The journey showed me his change, but vengeance calls to me still. The raid took my child, my heritage. Those ancient scrolls burned to ash, held knowledge like the Shadowroot ritual. Helping him felt like betrayal, yet his boy's innocence mirrors what I lost. Her words cut deep, forcing Harlan to confront the full extent of his past sins. He dropped to one knee, not in defeat but in humility, his determined personality yielding to redemption. I was wrong, he admitted, his tone raw. I led that raid, thinking it was about survival, but it destroyed lives. Let me make it right, not just with words, but actions. The ranch's borders redrawn, resources shared, peace for all our children. The chief considered this, his warriors murmuring among themselves. The air grew still, the only movement the boy's faint stirring from inside the homestead, the elixir working its final wonders. Mira approached Harlan, her piercing eyes softening as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've learned the ways," she said softly. "The plant's power isn't just in healing bodies, but spirits." In that moment the choice crystallized. Vengeance would perpetuate the cycle, but redemption offered a new path. The chief nodded slowly, signaling his men to stand down. "We accept," he declared, "but we watch. One falter, and the high country's storms will seem merciful." Harlan's crew, seeing their leader's resolve and the tide turning, lowered their weapons. Jed grumbled but holstered his pistol, the rebellion quashed by the raw display of vulnerability. As the Apache riders departed, fading into the rocky horizons toward Thunder Ridge Camp, Harlan returned inside. His son sat up weakly, color fully returned to his cheeks, the fever broken at last. The boy smiled, a miracle forged from peril and pain. Mira lingered at the doorway, her resilient spirit finding a measure of peace. "The ritual is complete," she murmured, "but the true healing begins now." In the days that followed, Harlan made good on his promises. Deeds were drawn up under the wide-open skies of 1872. Lands returned to the tribe, water rights shared along the creeks that fed both Willow Creek Ranch and the distant camp. The empty pastures slowly refilled as alliances formed, horses traded back in gestures of goodwill. Mira chose to stay for a time, teaching more of her ancient knowledge, her haunted past easing with each shared story around campfires. Harlan's regret transformed into purpose, his resourceful nature channeling into building bridges rather than walls. The confrontation had been brutal, lives teetering on the edge like the raging river they'd crossed in the high country, secrets revealed, alliances, unrest, deep-seated pains had forced the ultimate choice. Redemption won, not through force, but surrender, healing not just a boy's fever, but the wounds of two worlds. As the sun set over the sprawling plains, casting golden hues on wooden homesteads and teepee echoes in the distance, a tentative harmony settled. Harlan watched his son play in the pastures, laughter replacing the hollow-eyed stare, while Mira stood beside him, her long black hair catching the wind. The Shadowroot plant's legacy endured, a symbol of what could be mended when old grudges gave way to fragile trust. No more massacres loomed, instead a future unfolded, woven from the threads of forgiveness and shared strength. The Old West, with its rocky deserts and vast skies, bore witness to this quiet victory where one man's desperate gamble birthed lasting peace. If you loved these CTA tips for killer YouTube endings, smash that like button and subscribe for more game-changing advice.